record and
All these glasses.
spotlight. Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. So excited to do Torah Tea today. Okay, so we are going to dive into a story in this week's Torah portion that is actually in today's Aliyah, right? So the Torah portion is broken up and we learn a little bit of every day of the week. And so today, Wednesday, of the Torah portion is actually the story that we're going to dive into today. Now, I'm going to make some disclaimers before we get started. Does anyone hear that?
I do. What is it?
Yes, yeah,
Wow.
like a static.
Yeah. Like, is that my microphone? What is going on?
I just muted me, so I know it's not me. If each of us mute, then we can kind of rule that out.
Well, I feel like it's my
I'm
microphone.
not sure that's it. I think it's just some static somewhere.
It's hard to hear me. Is that any better to hear me?
Same difference.
Same thing.
Well,
Doesn't matter.
Maybe it's the 11th plague. It wouldn't surprise me.
We'll ignore it.
Phil
Okay.
can hear you. A little sound doesn't bother. I mean, it's
It's just solving the mystery would be good.
Okay.
Why don't
The
we
other
all
thing-
why don't we all mute ourselves and see
Yeah.
what happens? Everybody mute yourself.
I'm still
I
hearing
can't.
static.
I can't see how to.
I wonder if I should switch to a different Bluetooth. Oh. Let's see. Okay.
Yeah, it's some kind of connection. That's what it is. It sounds like, a loose wire, or it's not, something's not in there. It's not a big deal. We can
Okay.
leave
I'm going to
on.
continue. And if it continues, then I'll switch and I'll take off this microphone and use something else in case that's what it is. Okay. So we are going to dive into a story that is very, very, very challenging to understand at the surface level, right? I always tell you that if you learn Torah, if you just read the translation of the Torah, you're going to end up with more questions than answers. And it's possible that even as we dig into the story and go into the layers and go into the mysticism on it and the Kabbalah on it and the Hasidus on it, we still might have more questions than answers, but it's part of Torah and it's fascinating. And so we're going to dive into it and we're going to see where we end up. So I was trying to just read everything I could get my hands on this story, and so that I could address everyone's questions properly, but I'd rather say I don't know than give you the wrong answers. And so we might end up with more questions than answers by the end of this Torah portion, but it is fascinating and there is so much to learn regardless. So we're doing Torah portion, but also right through the eyes of a woman. So I'm kind of taking out the feminine aspect from the Torah portion and diving into that. And in this week's Torah portion, we have the very famous story of Joseph and his brothers and being thrown into the pit and sold into slavery and all of that. But smack in the middle of that story, we have this whole other story of one of Joseph's brothers, Judah, Judah, the one that actually said, let's sell him. And we have this whole other story with Yehuda and Tamar. Now, Tamar is actually the name, my mother's name is Tamar, right? So we're going to dive into that story. And I'm going to share my screen with you and bring the handout up on the screen. Okay. So, so we're going to start off with just the Parsha in a nutshell right over here. And this is just an overview of the Torah portion, again, at its most surface level, just straight out story of kind of just what's happening in this Torah portion, right? So Jacob settles in Hebron with his 12 sons. And his favorite is his 17-year-old Joseph, whose brothers are jealous. And again, I just want you all to know, right, there is so much depth in every single one of these sentences. And so, right, this is literally the face value. And we're not even going to go into this, right? What do we mean? They're jealous of his brothers. And, I could be jealous of a sibling. I'm not throwing them into pits. I'm not selling them into slavery, right? There's so much else we could dig into. Today, we're going to dig into the story of Yehuda and Tamar. Okay. So, right. So Yosef gets this preferential treatment from his father. He gets this beautiful coat, and he kind of tells his brothers about he has these two dreams where it seems like he's kind of going to rule over them, and then they're increasing envy and hatred and jealousy towards him. Okay. So what happens? Shimon and Levi, they plot to kill him. And Reuven suggests, let's just throw him into a pit instead. And Reuven leaves and he's like, I'll come back later and save Joseph. And while Joseph is in the pit, Yehuda decides instead, let's not kill him. Let's sell him. So there's a passing caravan of Ishmaelites. They sell him there, and those Ishmaelites sell him to another passing caravan, and he ends up in Egypt. And the brothers take Joseph's multicolored coat, his special coat, they dip it in blood of a goat, and they show it to their father, so their father thinks, oh, Joseph was killed by wild animals. Okay, smack in the middle where that story is, there's like this, it almost seems like so random, right? That it now starts, it has like a breakaway story and tells us this whole other interesting story that we're going to dig into about Yehuda, right? So Yehuda gets married. He has 3 children. The eldest so he has 3 children, Er, Einan, and Shelah. So the oldest is Er. He dies young and childless. And so Er marries Tamar, right? So Tamar is Yehuda's daughter-in-law. Er dies. And there's a mitzvah that if there is if there's a male who dies childless, there is a mitzvah for his wife to marry his brother, okay, to like continue his chain, to continue his legacy, okay? So obviously this is before the Torah is given, but we know that our forefathers and mothers kept the Torah even before it was given to some extent, not 100%. It depended on the case and the scenario, right? So Yehuda gives Tamar to the next son, Onan. Onan and Tamar get married. Then Onan dies, okay? So now 2 of his sons die after being married to Tamar. So Yehuda decides he's not going to give Tamar to his 3rd son, because now he has a 3rd son, Shelah. In this levirate marriage, okay? So Tamar, okay, we're doing this on the surface level. So determined to have a child from Yehuda's family, Tamar disguises herself as a prostitute and seduces Yehuda himself. In other words, she's like, I'm going to have a child through this family. He's not giving me to the 3rd son, okay? So Yehuda hears that his daughter-in-law has become pregnant and orders her executed through burning for this prostitution, for harlotry. But when Tamar produces some personal effects he left with her as a pledge for payment, he publicly admits that he is the father. Tamar gives birth to twin sons, Peretz, who is an ancestor of King David, which then we know the line of the Mashiach comes from them. So we're talking about Tamar being like the ancestor of Mashiach, King David to Mashiach, and Zerach. Okay, and then the Torah portion ends with Joseph is taken to Egypt, sold to Potiphar, the minister in charge of Paro's slaughterhouses. God blesses everything he does, and soon he's made overseer of all his master's property. So, and then we also have the story of Potiphar's wife, right? I was thinking of, if we do like the female aspect, that's a whole other story with Potiphar's wife and Joseph, but I don't think we're going to get to do both of those in today. She desires the handsome and charismatic Joseph. Joseph rejects her. She tells her husband that the Hebrew slave tried to force himself on her and has him thrown into prison. Joseph gains the trust and admiration of his jailers, who appoint him to a position of authority in the prison administration. And in prison, Joseph meets Paro's chief butler, chief baker. They both have dreams. Joseph interprets the dreams. And his predictions of what's going to happen to them are fulfilled, but Joseph remains in prison. Okay, packed Torah portion, so much in here. But again, like I told you, we are going to dive into Yehuda and Tamar. And again, I just want to say that anyone at any point can unmute themselves and ask any questions. Interactive class. Okay, so here I have the story of Yehuda and Tamar, like in the Hebrew and in the direct translation in the English. Okay. I did say it briefly. I'll just go through it again here in the English so that you kind of see it directly how it says it in the Torah. Okay. So now it came about at that time that Yehuda was demoted by his brothers, and he turned away until he came to an Adulamite man named Hira. And there, okay, so Yehuda moves away from his brothers because they are a little bit, they kind of blame him, okay? He was sort of like, Reuven had left them. Reuven said, Reuven had left, and now Yehuda was sort of like the one in charge, like the older brother they were all looking up to. And Yehuda had this idea, let's sell him and then tell dip his coat in blood and tell our father that he was killed. And so the brothers listened to him. And then when they saw how upset their father was, they kind of turned on Yehuda and were like, well, we listened to you, and look, this was such a terrible idea. So Yehuda kind of separates himself from his family a little bit. He moves further away. He gets married to the daughter of Shua, and he has 3 sons. So she conceived, his wife, the daughter of Shua, she conceived, bore a son, and he named him Er. And she conceived again, bore a son, she named him Onan. And once again, she bore a son, she named him Shelah. And he, Yehuda, was in Chaziv when she gave birth to him. And Yehuda took a wife for Er, his firstborn, named Tamar. Now Er, Yehuda's firstborn, was evil in the eyes of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. So Yehuda said to Onan, come to your brother's wife and perform the rite of the leveret and raise up progeny for your brother. Now, Onan knew that the progeny would not be his, and it came about when he came to his brother's wife, he wasted his seed on the ground in order not to give seed to his brother. In other words, he didn't want to just have a son that would be like for the sake of his brother. Now, what he did was evil in the eyes of God, and he put him to death also. Okay, 2 sons die. Then Yehuda said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, remain as a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up, for he said, lest he too die like his brothers. So Tamar went, and she remained in her father's house. So Yehuda led her on. He was like, let's wait a little bit till you marry Shelah. So in that sense, she was sort of promised to Shelah, so she wasn't going to marry anybody else. But Yehuda didn't really have any intention of giving Shelah to her because he was scared that his 3rd son was going to die. Many days passed, and Shua's daughter, Yehuda's wife, died. So now Yehuda's wife passes away. Yehuda was consoled, and he went up to watch over his sheep shearers, he and Chira, his Adulamite friend, to Timnah. Okay. So Tamar is told exactly where Yehuda is going to be. It was told to Tamar, saying, behold, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So she knows where he's going to be. So what does she do? She takes off her widow's garb. She covers her head with a veil and covered her face. And she sat down at the crossroads that were on the way to Timnah, for she saw that Shelah had grown up. But as for her, she was not given to him for a wife. She sees, like, Yehuda's not really going to give me Shelah. I am meant to have children through this family. When Yehuda saw her, he thought she was a harlot because she covered her face. So he turned aside toward her to the road, and he said, get ready now. I will come to you. For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, what will you give me that you should come to me? Like, what are you going to give me in return? And he said, I'm going to send a kid from the herd. Like, I'm going to give you a goat. And she said, only if you give me a pledge until you send it. In other words, if you're going to give me a goat, until the goat comes, what do I have as security? So he said, what is the pledge that I should give you? And she said, your signet ring, your cloak, and the staff that is in your hand. Okay. Oh my gosh. Sorry, distracted by a very cute baby. Okay. So he gave them to her, and he came to her, and she conceived his likeness. Okay. So he gives her these 3 objects, and she becomes pregnant. Then she arose and went away, and she took off her veil, and she donned her widow's garb. So Yehuda has no idea who this is. She goes back, right? And Yehuda sent the kid by the hand of his Adulamite friend to take the pledge from the woman's hand, but he did not find her. In other words, Yehuda sends his friend to say, okay, I owe this goat to this woman. Go give it to her. And Chira, he goes around, he asked the people of the place, where is this harlot who was at the crossroads on the way? And they said, there was no harlot here. So he returned to Yehuda, and he said, I have not found her. And the people of the place also said, no harlot was here. So Yehuda said, let her take them for herself, lest we become a laughingstock. Behold, I sent this kid, but you did not find her. So he's like, okay, she's going to keep these 3 things because we can't find her. Now, 3 months pass, and now Tamar is showing that she's expecting. So it comes back to Yehuda saying, your daughter-in-law Tamar has played the harlot, and behold, she is pregnant from harlotry, right? If she's not married, and he hasn't given Shelah to her, and she's destined for Shelah, and she's pregnant, what happened here? So Yehuda said, bring her out and let her be burned. She was taken out, and she sent to her father-in-law, saying, from the man, so she's on her way to be punished severely, and she has these 3 objects that belong to Yehuda, and she says, she has a message sent to Yehuda saying, whoever these belong to, that is the father of my child. That's who I'm pregnant by. And she said, please recognize whose signet ring, cloak, and staff are these. And Yehuda recognized them. And he said, she is right. It is from me because I did not give her to my son Shelah. But he no longer continued to be intimate with her. That actually means, again, you have to, this like Torah is like this very cryptic. If you just read that makes it sound like like if you read between the lines, he no longer continued to be intimate with her in that way. He actually married her. So it was legitimate intimacy, I guess, if you could put it that way. Like that's the like in between the lines. And it came about at the time she was giving birth that behold, there were twins in her womb. So the end of the story now, she's going to give birth. She actually is pregnant with twins. And it came about when she gave birth that she had like one of the twins stretched out their hands, and the midwife took a red string and tied it around the finger of the baby that like stretched out their hand, saying like, this one came out first. But then the baby like drew back its hand and the other baby came out first. And she said, with what strength you have strengthened yourself. And they named him. So the actual firstborn, the one that came out first, was Peretz. And the second brother emerged, the one with the string around his finger, and they named him Zerach. By the way, there's so much other fascinating stuff just about that little piece of the story. But again, we're going to dive into Yehuda and Tamar. So that is the direct translation from the Torah of this story that probably leaves all of you with a million questions. Am I right? All right. So let's understand the story of Yehuda and Tamar. Okay. And again, at any point, anyone can unmute themselves and ask any of their questions. Okay, so this is a very fascinating story. Like we said before, Yehuda has 3 sons. 2 of them die after being married to Tamar. And this idea of, it's called Yibum, this like levirate marriage, where the brother marries the wife of his deceased brother. Okay, so here we're introduced for the first time to the concept of a levirate marriage, Yibum, which is also discussed later in the Torah when it says, when brothers live together and one of them dies childless, the wife of the deceased man shall not marry outside to a strange man. Her brother-in-law shall come to her and take her to himself as a wife and perform levirate marriage. The firstborn son whom she bears will then perpetuate the name of the dead brother so that his name will be not obliterated from Israel. Okay, so it is a mitzvah. There is also an out for, like, in other words, it doesn't mean you just automatically have to. If they don't want to, there's another like ceremony that they perform called chalitza, which then makes it that you don't have to have that marriage, but it is a mitzvah. Okay, so one of the greatest biblical commentators, Nachmanides, the Ramban, writes that this mitzvah embodies one of the great mysteries of the Torah, and that even before the Torah was given, people knew of the spiritual benefits of a levirate marriage, a marriage of Yibum. And the biblical commentators explain that the child born of the union between the brother of the dead man and his former wife, both of whom are intimately connected with the deceased man, right? One's the brother, one's the widow, is considered the spiritual son of the deceased. Moreover, the Kabbalah suggests that the firstborn child of the levirate marriage, the Yibum, is a reincarnation of the soul of its other's first husband, right? Of the brother that died, bringing the deceased man, as it were, back to life, right? It's like a way of continuing on his line. So Yehuda suggests to his second son, Einan, to marry his brother's widow and perpetuate the legacy of the deceased brother, but he didn't want to do that, and he also dies prematurely. And then Yehuda refuses to give Shelah to her, right? So this puts Tamar in a very impossible situation. She can't go out and marry anyone else because she is bound to Shelah, but her father-in-law won't let her marry Shelah. So what is she supposed to do, right? Now, during these early times, prior to the giving of the Torah, the Ramban explains other relatives, in addition to brothers, used to carry out this obligation of Yibum. And so following the death of both of Tamar's husbands, she went and lured her former father-in-law, Yehuda, into a relationship with her, which impregnated her. And as a guarantee that he would pay her for the relationship, Yehuda gave Tamar his seal, his cord, and his staff. So,
Question.
Yes.
When the second brother marries the widow of the first brother, that the child born of it would still be bar of the name would be the son of the man who actually conceived, but it would be kind of iffy, or he's supposed to be the spiritual son of the deceased,
Yeah.
but it'd be the man who actually was the biological father of this son, we're going to say son,
Yeah.
would be known as the father. But
Yes.
they would also know that it would be well known in the community, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a way of like carrying on his line, right? Like that, but at the same time, yes, his father is this father and mother.
Okay.
It's a way of like honoring the person that passed away.
What if the other brothers were already married?
Then they don't have this, right? It was only, right, then it wouldn't apply. It's just if there's an unmarried brother, he
Unmarried.
has a mitzvah to marry his brother's widow.
Well, in the days when people had multiple wives, would the second son would not be obligated to marry the widow of the first? I mean, if he was already married, and I know people did have multiple wives.
Right, that's a good question.
That's
Would it still
probably
apply?
maybe more of a choice. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have to look that up. I'm not 100% sure.
I think one of the bases for this rule, this law, might relate to the fact that they need to make sure that the property goes in a specific way, the property of the dead husband. And so the wife is taken care of this way also, if she gets one of her brothers-in-law to marry her, and the property stays in the family and the name stays in the family, the last name.
So there's like physical benefits to this. There's also spiritual benefits to this, right? Right. A physical benefit would be that the wife is taken care of and she still has, you know, her land and her money and all her stuff, and someone's, you know, yeah, that she's still part of the family, that she's still that's like physical benefits. But then there's also a spiritual benefit to carry on this person's legacy, so to speak. Yeah.
Even
Okay.
if the legacy isn't that great, it sounds like the first husband wasn't that nice of a person or good of a person. It's that he did things that weren't so great. So you still, even so, you carry on a legacy.
Yeah. Yes. Now, it's actually true what you're bringing up. In other words, after two of her husbands died, everyone thought that Tamar was the issue, like that, almost like she was cursed. But it was false. Er and Onan were the issue, not Tamar. Right? Like they died because of their sins and their problems, but Tamar was not cursed. But people didn't realize that. They thought that it was because of Tamar. Okay. So 3 months pass and everyone knows that Tamar is pregnant, and it comes back to Yehuda, and right, we went through the story again. Okay. Okay, so now we want to understand it. Okay, we want to like dig a lot deeper here, because this is a very interesting story and it definitely raises a lot of questions. Okay, so over here, understanding the story of Yehuda and Tamar, text number 1, the Midrash tells us something fascinating. Okay, in verse number 1 that we read up above, when Yehuda saw her, he took her for a prostitute, he turned aside to her. Okay. And we're going to kind of like dig into that a little bit. So the Midrash tells us something very fascinating going on here. Let's see. Jolie, do you want to read that for us? Text number 1.
I should probably unmute. Okay, so starting with when Judah saw her?
Yeah.
Okay. When Judah saw her, he took her for a prostitute. He turned aside to her. The Midrash describes the incident of Judah and Tamar as follows. The progenitors of the tribes were busy with the sale of Joseph. Joseph was busy mourning over his separation from his father. Reuben was busy with his penitence. Jacob was busy mourning over Joseph. Judah was busy getting married, and God was busy creating the light of the Messiah. Since Joseph was descending to Egypt, beginning the process of exile, God wanted to preempt the exile with the potential for redemption to prepare the cure prior to the onset of the illness.
Okay, sorry. Can I just pause, interrupt
Yeah.
you for a second there? First of all, welcome, Diane. Okay, just to pause, I just want to like really help you on just this Midrash over here is like fascinating, okay, right? Because we see this whole story, and of course, like, it's just raises a lot of questions, and we might be shocked. We might be like, what is going on here? And how is any of this okay? And all of that. And hopefully we will, get some resolution there. But just to see what the Midrash says, like, the tribes are busy selling Joseph right now. That's what's happening, right? Joseph is mourning over like the fact that he just was separated from his father. Reuven is mourning over a mistake that he made, and we can talk about that, but that's another story. And Yaakov is busy mourning over Joseph. He finds out his son's gone, and Judah is getting married, right? And then God is busy creating the light of the Messiah. In other words, we said that Tamar, right, from her came Peretz, from Peretz down the line came King David HaMelech, and from David HaMelech comes Mashiach. So regardless of what this actual story is, regardless of what's actually going on in this story, what's happening here is that the line with which Mashiach is going to come from is being created. Okay. And that's where Jolie just read. In other words, Joseph is about to descend into Egypt, which is the beginning of the slavery of the Jewish people, right? That was actually the beginning marker, like the beginning of Jewish people in Egypt, down to the entire story of Passover and Pesach and the Jewish people being redeemed and all of that, the first time of being in exile down to our exile today, leading up to our future redemption, right? We're all waiting for Mashiach. So to prepare the cure before the illness, I think there's like an English phrase for that, right? Like in Hebrew, it's like refuah lifnei hamaka, like God gives us the healing before the plague. Like the solution to coronavirus already exists. We just don't know it. But like before coronavirus came, God already had the healing for that, right? And now people are working to create that. So here it's like exile for the Jewish people is about to begin. So God is creating the antidote for that, which is Mashiach. And that starts with Tamar. Okay, go ahead, Jolie.
Thus, the Midrash continues, although the righteous Judah wanted to continue past Tamar, God sent an angel of lust to steer him to her. The angel said to Judah, "Where are you going? From where will kings arise? From where will the redeemers arise?" He thus turned toward her against his will. Interesting. The Midrash notes the Torah's use of the phrase, "He turned aside to her." Instead of the more common, "he went to her." The same idiom is used to describe how Balaam's donkey turned aside off the road against its will because an angel blocked its path, Numbers 22-23. The use of this idiom thus clearly implies that Judah turned aside to Tamar against his will.
Okay. Yes. So if we go back.
Who wrote that?
The Midrash.
Okay.
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 So
All right. Okay.
if we go back to, hold on. Oh, there we go. Here it is. Let me do this. I'm going to make a circle for you. Draw a circle right here. So right here, this word, vayet, right? He turned away. And I think it's used again when he sees Tamar. Okay, that word vayet, he turned away, is like usually vayelech. It's like when you go towards someone. He turned away. It's like I'm turned away by force, right? Like so that word is used in a different story that we're not going to go into, but in a different story with Bilam, who's riding a donkey, and the donkey, like an angel, blocks his path, and the donkey, it says vayet, like he was forced to turn this way, like to turn away, to turn to the side. Okay, so let me just get back down to where we were. Okay, so what this midrash is telling us actually is that Yehuda was not prone to like prostitution or harlotry or whatever it is, right? He's passing this woman. He wouldn't turn towards her. He would turn away from her, but he was an angel of lust came before him and was like, basically they had to somehow make this happen, right? Mashiach's going to come from this line. There had to be children coming from Tamar and Yehuda's family. So this angel came and like forced Yehuda to pay attention to Tamar. Okay. So where are we now? Back down here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Tamar's character. Okay, and this is from a talk of the Rebbe, text number 2. Sharon, do you want to read that for us? There we go.
Posing as a prostitute was similarly out of character for Tamar, but she was a paragon of modesty. Indeed, it was in virtue of this quality that God chose her to be the mother of the Davidic dynasty. Nevertheless, when she realized that all other options had been closed, she selflessly acted contrary to her nature for the sake of drawing forth the soul of the Messiah.
Okay. So again here, right, like, because we can have questions on Yehuda, which we probably do. We can have questions on Tamar, which we probably do. But, right, we could say, well, maybe she's just, like kind of like last week when we spoke about Dina, some people asked, well, maybe Dina was just a little, I don't know what the word is, like a little too out there, a little too like, yeah, let's go, and I was like, no, that is not who Dina was. So let's go to Tamar. What was she like this? No, here we see she was a paragon of modesty. And because of that, because of this quality, God chose her to be the mother of the whole Davidic dynasty, right? And nevertheless, when she realized all her options are closed, okay, but she knew that children were going to come from her, from the family of Yehuda, and she was like between a rock and a hard place, right? She acted contrary to her nature. It was actually mesirat nefesh. It was a selfless act on her part for the sake of drawing down the soul of Mashiach, okay? And so Tamar's
question.
Yes.
Or a comment, actually. It's interesting, prior, this kind of came up. When Tamar was referred to as wanting to have a child from this family, my question was, why? I mean, she had already gone through 2 of the brothers. What was the driving force? We see Judah's driving force here. There's nothing here mentioned about why was she driven to continue with this family? She
knew prophetically. She saw that kings would come from Yehuda, like that the line of the Davidic dynasty and Mashiach dynasty was from her and someone in Judah's family.
So that's not, did I not read that? Is that in another interpretation? Was that said here? Did I miss it?
No, you did not miss it. That is not like directly, that is not like I said, in the cryptic part, in the direct translation in the Torah.
Okay.
Where do we know that from? I don't think I brought the source in this handout, and I apologize for that.
Okay, no, that's fine. I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah.
That's fine. Thank you.
In other words, her intentions were pure. Her intentions were pure. Yehuda's were not, but they were also like not necessarily intention, right? It was sort of like he, right, said like this angel of lust kind of put him there and did this. And he ended up, and we'll talk a little bit more about Yehuda, like Yehuda actually, Hoda means acknowledgement. He acknowledged his mistake here multiple times. And he is also a paragon, like a really good example of like a Baal Teshuvah, someone who changes their ways and really changes the person that they were, right? Like he really did some things that weren't okay, and he really became a huge role model and a huge, like the Davidic and Mashiach dynasty comes from him. And there's a lot there also, like why from him and not from Joseph. And there was this whole standoff between Yehuda and Yosef, and Yosef wanted to make sure that Yehuda really repented or whatever, did real teshuvah for being the one to suggest throwing him into selling him and all that. So that's technically more of another story, but hopefully we'll cover some more of that here. Okay, so text number 3, why was it necessary? Okay, so now we're saying that all of this whole tangled up story had to come about in order to bring about the soul of Mashiach, right? It was eventually to bring, it was like God creating the cure before the sickness, and like the times of Mashiach before the exile. So the question really that we're left with then is like, why is it necessary for the light of Mashiach to enter the world through such a seemingly scandalous route? Right? Like it really seems like, whoa, like what is going on here? And okay, so text number 3, let's see. Who wants to read that for us? Do you want to read that for us, Vivian? And welcome.
Okay. So read the question is, why was it necessary for the light of the Messiah to enter the world through such a seemingly skinless route? We need to recall that God created evil in order for there to be free choice. Thus, in order for free choice to exist, the forces of evil and the forces of good have to be perfectly balanced at any given time. It is for this reason we are taught that the greater a person is, that is, the greater his spiritual potential, the greater is his evil inclination. Were his spiritual greatness to outweigh his evil inclination, he would have no free choice. When the messianic line was about to enter the world, the forces of evil argued that the balance was about to be tipped against them. Therefore, the union that would bear the ancestor of the Messiah had to occur in a way that the forces of evil would consider beneficial to them. Just as in military strategy, an army sometimes feigns retreat in order to draw the enemy into a vulnerable position, the forces of holiness here yielded a seeming victory to the forces of evil in the form of this quasi-sinful act in order to gain the upper hand.
Okay. This is very fascinating. And we have this like rule that God created the world. It says in the Talmud and the Zohar, zel le'uma zel, like this opposite that. In other words, equal forces of good and evil in the world, okay, to create free choice. And so, fascinatingly, right, this concept where like when the messianic line was about to enter the world, the forces of evil were like, whoa, we're that's not equal over here, right? That's going to be tipped toward positivity. And so, in order to like it had to kind of be wrapped up in this story, so to speak, so that it would keep this, I don't know, status quo is not the right word, but like keep this balance of between good and evil. Okay. So the stories in the Torah, right, they're not just tales relating to ancient Jewish history, right? And it's not just like, oh, this is fascinating, or like, what's the detail here? It's not a history book. It's not, there's so much more, there's so much like of the stories that we don't know than that we do know, which is obviously the reason is because whatever we do know is meant to be a lesson for us in living our lives, and not just so that we can like fill in the gaps of like every part of the life of our ancestors. So they also reflect spiritual timeless experiences that take place continuously within the human soul. So we need to understand, what does this story mean for us? And now we're going to go into a very like a kind of like a deep interpretation, but something very fascinating that can relate to like us, like the journey, like what we're taking from the story as an example for what our soul journey is like. Okay. So text number 4, the Ramban says, the Torah discusses the physical reality, but it alludes to the world of the spirit. So what follows, what we're going to go into right now, is a very classical Hasidic interpretation on this entire episode of Yehuda and Tamar. In other words, we learn this story, but what does this mean on a much deeper level, right? What is the symbolism of this story? It relates to the inner spiritual life of the Jew, okay? And so in the writings of the Kabbalah, the name Yehuda has the 4-letter name of Hashem. It has a Yud, a Hey, a Vav, and a Hey.
Yuda
Symbolizes God, right? God's name is in the name Yehuda. And Tamar is the Hebrew name for a palm tree. That's what Tamar means. It means a palm tree. And it represents the Jewish people and their bond with God. So let's understand why. So this is a quote from the Talmud. Just as the palm tree has but one heart, so too do the Jewish people have only a single heart, devoted completely to their Father in heaven. Okay, and that's from the Talmud. And then Rashi says, the heart of the date palm is its sap. Unlike the saps of other trees, like, sorry, spelling mistake, Andrea, don't get mad at me. Unlike the olive or almond tree, the sap of the palm is found only in its trunk, but not in its branches or leaves. This is the meaning behind the Talmudic statement that the palm tree possesses only a single heart. Okay, so the intimate union between Tamar and Yehuda, right, is symbolic of the Jew and God. Okay, so now, if we go to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, not too long ago, during those days, God, or Yehuda is the one that's symbolizing God here, right?
Yehuda.
The name Yehuda has God's letters in it, exposes himself to his people, evoking within them a yearning to transcend their ego and self-centered cravings and to become one with God. Okay, so that's what Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is. It's like we're transcending ourselves. God inspires us to transcend ourselves, right? Like there's things that we do even on Rosh Hashanah, especially Yom Kippur, right? We're not eating, people have accustomed to wear white like angels, things like that, where we do certain things that make us above the world, transcending our physicality. But then some time passes, right? We go past the high holy days, the spiritual inspiration of the high holy days wears off, and Judah is informed that Tamar, your Kala, has committed harlotry, and moreover, she has become pregnant by harlotry. Okay, so what does this mean? The news arrives to God that his bride, who's his bride, us, have betrayed him, substituting him with another partner, right? And is this not the story of many of us, right? At one point during our lives, we're inspired, we want to transcend ourselves, transcend our selfish identity, connect to something deeper, something divine, right? Yet the cunning lure of numerous other gods captivates our imaginations and ambitions and dulls our vision. We substituted the God of truth and transcendence with the ego God, the power God, the money God, the temptation God, the addiction God, the manipulation God, the God of self-indulgence, right? All of these are our gods, whatever it is that we're like really putting all of our focus, all of our energy into, other than Torah, mitzvot, and the one God, right? So what is even sadder for Judah is the news that Tamar, and again, Tamar is the Jewish people, is so estranged, or the Jewish people on a macro level, and each one of us individually on a micro level, that she became pregnant by harlotry. This symbolizes the stage in life when the Jew rejects the God of his forefathers permanently and decides to build his future with superficial sources of gratification. Okay, so it's like, done with that, not interested, and this, again, this could take many forms. For some people, it could just be that they say, I'm converting out of Judaism. It's not really possible, but they think they are, right? Or I'm an atheist. I don't even believe in God. Or it could just be on a smaller level where we're just like, it's just not in our realm of what we think about. We're like, yeah, I'm busy with, paying my bills and making, whatever, dealing with my family. Like, we're just like, we don't even think about God. It could be so many levels, this concept, okay? This estrangement that we have. Take her out and have her burned, says Judah. The purpose of the Jew is to serve as a spiritual compass of human civilization, to bear witness to the truth of the one God, the moral consciousness of the world. When the Jew loses sight of I don't know how to pronounce that French nice term, of his existence, the reason for his existence.
It's reason for raison d'être.
Thank you.
French, reason for existence, reason to be.
Thank you. I could use words without knowing how to pronounce them. By the way, all day long, my Hadassah, my 10-year-old, she loves and loves and loves to read, and she pronounces everything wrong because she just makes up the spelling. So she'll be like, I thought you say it this way. I thought you say it this way. Okay. Anyways, so when the Jew loses sight of his reason for existence, his existence is useless. Okay. So Rabbi Isaac Luria wrote that the judgment that began on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, this is where we're coming to now in our calendar, is completed some 3 months later during the days of Hanukkah, right? So we start with that, like transcending our ego, really connecting to God, high holidays. Then we trickle away from it, right? And that's why it is at this period of time, 3 months, Hanukkah's 3 months later, after the intimate union between Yehuda and Tamar, right? What happened? Like that Judah, which is the metaphor for God, is informed regarding the spiritual status of Tamar, the Jewish people, and the verdict is issued, Tamar has no future. In other words, right? She committed something that was so terrible that she had to die for it. So when Tamar was being taken out, she sent word to Judah saying, I'm pregnant by the man who is the owner of these articles. Identify, I beg you, these objects. Who is the owner of this seal, cord, and staff? During that fateful time, when the prosecuting angels have almost been successful in demonstrating to God that the Jewish people are a failed experiment, at that very moment, the Jew sends word to God saying, I'm pregnant by the man who is the owner of these articles. Okay? So again, how this relates to us is that the high holidays, right, where we're transcending ourselves, we're feeling connected, then it kind of trickles away. And then angels on high are like, look, God, those Jewish people that were like all into you in the synagogue on the high holidays, asking for forgiveness and committing to a great year, look where they're at now, right? Then comes Hanukkah and we're like, hi, we actually belong to you. the information you received that I abandoned you is a blatant lie. That's what we get to say. Like, we're lighting our menorah, God. Look at us over here. If I have gone astray here and there, it is merely a superficial, temporary phase. Gaze into the deeper layers of my identity, and you will discover that I belong to you, that my intimacy is shared only with you, God. I am pregnant from Judah and not from anybody else. In other words, Hanukkah is like our recommitment. Chanukah comes from the word chinuch, which is it's education. It's also dedication. It means to dedicate. Hanukkah is actually our times to rededicate ourselves to God, because we had the high holidays where it was maybe really easy and we had a lot more inspiration. And then that time trickled by and Hanukkah's like, wait, back to our rededication to God. So that's kind of like when we say, identify, I beg you, these objects. Who is the owner of this seal, cord, and staff? For during the festival of Hanukkah, when the judgment of Rosh Hashanah is finalized, the Jew kindles each night a wick or a cord soaked in oil, commemorating the event of the Jews discovering a sealed single cruse of oil after the Greeks had plundered in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. Okay, this is so in the word for wick is pisila. In Hebrew, it means a string or a wick. And if you remember, Judah gave her the string, a cord. He gave her a cord that he used to bind his sheep. So that's like another, the idea that the Hanukkah is that it's that recommitment, rededication. The Jew further points to the staff in his arm. The Hebrew term for the staff is vehamata. That means and the staff, which also has the same, every letter in the Hebrew aleph bet has a numerical number, right? So aleph is 1, bet is 2. So vehamata and the stick is the same numerical value as the word hakeli, which is the vessel, symbolic of the menorah, where it's one of the vessels in the Holy Temple, and it's the vessel that we kindle the Hanukkah flames with, the menorah. So this verse is alluding to the three components of the Hanukkah lights, right? What do we have? We have the menorah, the wick, and the oil. Okay, which, by the way, tomorrow night, everyone can join right here, same exact link and everything on Zoom. We'll light the menorah together, and I will use oil and wick, and we'll light an oil menorah, and we're going to play a really fun virtual dreidel game and watch a video and share some Hanukkah messages. And anyways, I have like a fun Hanukkah event planned right here on Zoom. And if you let me know whether you plan to join, then hopefully tomorrow I'm going to drop off little Hanukkah packages for everybody in advance. You can join if you don't let me know, I won't know to drop off a package. Okay, so in order to preserve his faith, he was forced time and time again for 2,000 years to take the wandering staff in his arm, abandon his home, his wealth, and security, we're talking about the Jewish people, or each Jew, and seek out new territory where he could continue to live as a Jew, right? So identify, I beg you, these objects. Who is the owner of this seal, this cord, and this staff? The Jew asked God. It is to this man that I am pregnant. Our loyalty and commitment remain eternally to the owner of the seal and the cord of the Hanukkah flames. In other words, our deepest intimacy is reserved to the owner of the staff of Jewish wandering. In other words, we're saying to God, we are committed to you and only you. Judah immediately recognized the articles, right? Back to the story. And he said, she is right. It is from me that she conceived. She did it because I did not give her to my son, Shelah. So when God observed the burning flames of observes in the present, our menorah, our Hanukkah flames burning, he immediately recognized that we have never left him. And it's true that the Jew does fall prey at times to the dominating external forces of a materialistic and immoral world, yet this enslavement is skin deep, right? Yes, it could be that sometimes we get caught up in other things. It could be that sometimes we don't make godliness or Torah part of our regular daily life and schedule, all of those things. But even when that happens, that is just a skin deep level of us, right? Probe the layers of our actual soul, and we have so much spirituality. We have so much love for God. If the Jew has, in fact, gone astray here and there, it is my fault, God says, not his. Yehuda took ownership, right? God says it's my fault because I did not give Tamar to my son Shelah. Now, Shelah is actually a biblical term used to describe Mashiach, interestingly, right? Who's the leader that's going to usher in the final redemption. So God says that for 2 millennia, I have kept the Jewish nation in a dark and horrific exile where they've had horrendous pain and suffering, right? Still going on. Blood, tears, death, hardship, sickness, all these things, right? And we're constantly praying for a world of redemption, but it hasn't come yet. So God says, how can I expect that a Jew never commit a sin? Like, really? God expects he's going to give us all this exile and all this tragedy, all this difficulty, and we're supposed to just be like 100% faithful all the time, right? How can I expect that a Jew never try to cast his luck with the materialism of the world that could be so appealing, or all the God-like things, like we said before, that we could get addicted to, or, you know, in like different things that we get enslaved to, so to speak. When I held back for so long the light of Mashiach, it is I, God, who is guilty of treason, God says, not the Jew. Tamar is an innocent, beautiful palm tree, which still has only one heart to its Father in heaven. We are a miracle. All we need to do is tap into it. We are truly incredible. When God decided to marry us, he knew he was getting a really good deal, right? And that's really what Chassidus does. Also, it like really turns a story on its head. And right, like this story is telling us a Jew, like the meaning for our soul and its journey, a Jew is a child of God. We are worthy 100%. We are pure and holy. And any single thing that we can do or that can make it look like we are straying from that, like that's not ultimately who we are. Who we are at our core is a godly soul that wants to do the right thing, that wants to stay married to God. Okay? Does anyone have any questions? All right. Nobody.
I have a question back at the very beginning.
Yes.
Way at the beginning, it says, Tamar, your kala. And it was like, I thought kala meant bride.
Yeah.
And so Yehuda, anyway, it would seem to be before, way in the back.
Yeah. Let me just, I'm going to just look for where that word comes up in the actual text. Okay. Over here, you see in verse 11, then Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, Vayomer Yehuda leTamar kalaso, which is very interesting that it translates here as daughter-in-law.
But that's not what I'm go down a little bit farther. You may, I don't know if I can find it.
Okay, but just to show you here, in the Hebrew, it actually says, and Yehuda said to Tamar, his bride. That's like the Hebrew of it. Okay. But sorry, but you wanted.
It was someplace. Oh wait, I can't find it. Okay, keep going. Oh, it's when somebody says,
it's in the commentary.
Here too also.
It's in the commentary.
He turned aside toward her to the road and he said, get ready now, I will come to you. For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. It's very interesting. It translated as daughter-in-law. Wait, hold on. Yael, is kalaso daughter-in-law in modern Hebrew?
Adina?
Yeah.
Adina?
Yeah.
I don't think
It's Miriam speaking. As you are my kala, you married my son, so you were bride and you are the bride of my son, but forever you be my kala, my bride, because this daughter-in-law doesn't exist in Hebrew. The word is kala.
Okay, so is it referring that like Tamar was supposed to be his kala? Or you're saying it has nothing to do
Kala,
with
that means Kala, no, is the daughter-in-law. She's the daughter-in-law of Yehuda. And she's a Kala because he was supposed to give it to her next son. So she's still the Kala.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, someplace is the commentary more than this, but we can go on.
Right. So I think what you might be referring to, right, is where it says, sorry, when I went into
There it is. There it was. It was prior. It was just a little prior.
No, before that.
Yeah, before that.
Yes. No, it's before that.
Tamar,
right there.
Tamar, your kala has committed, right? Tamar, your kala. Yeah. I mean, here we like she was the kala, right, of Yehuda's son, and then his other son, and then she was, and then designated for Shelah, but really ends up being with Yehuda, right? So in the analogy that we're giving here of God, like Yehuda and Tamar, God and the Jewish people, God is like the groom and we are his bride. And that analogy is given to us many times over, like in other places as well. But that's in this analogy here.
Okay. Thank you.
So now just to talk a little bit about Yehuda here. Okay. So even though really the focus here is on Tamar, but Tamar is really the heroine of this story, but Yehuda does admit that he was wrong, okay? Yehuda does say she was more righteous than I, okay? And this is actually the first time in the Torah that someone acknowledges their own guilt. In Yehuda, his hoda means acknowledge, and Yehuda acknowledges, like, she's right, I was wrong. And it's also the turning point in Yehuda's life, okay? So this goes into a little bit later about Yehuda, but I just wanted to explain a little bit about him, that he acknowledged his own wrongdoing, he felt remorse for it, and he did real teshuvah. And that led, and we know that teshuvah, although everyone translates it as repentance, it really means return, okay? And Yehuda really turned his behavior on its head to become the opposite. Yehuda was known as Ish Teshuvah, someone who did real teshuvah, who really truly returned to God in the best way. And that's also another meaning of his name. There's a lot inside the word Yehuda, Judah. The verb lehodot, it means to think, because Leah named him that because she was thankful that she gave birth to her fourth son. And as she said, this time I will thank God, but it also means to admit, to acknowledge, like I said before, to confess. Vidui is like the Jewish confessional prayers that comes from Yehuda. And all of that is essential to teshuvah. You can only do proper teshuvah when you admit, I did something wrong. And Yehuda acknowledged that he did. Now, okay, I will... yes, Robin asked, isn't Ruvain also doing teshuvah right now? Yes, so there's another story with Ruvain where he made a mistake and he is also doing teshuvah for that. Just in very, very brief, what he did is when Rachel passed away, Yaakov moved his bed into Bilhah's tent, and Bilhah was the maidservant of Rachel, right? So Jacob was married to Rachel and Leah, and each of their maidservants, Bilhah and Zilpah. So Bilhah was with Rachel and Zilpah was with Leah. So Yaakov moved his bed into Bilhah's tent, and Reuven was like, 1 second, he should move his bed into my mother's tent, into Leah. So he moved the bed, and he was not supposed to have done that. It was wrong of him, and he was doing his own teshuvah for that. Separate story. Okay. So Judah means he who acknowledges his sin. So now we could also understand this idea, right, of teshuvah. Rabbi Abahu said, in the place where penitents stand, even the perfectly righteous cannot stand. In other words, we have different modes of path, the tzaddik, the perfectly righteous, and then the Baal teshuvah, somebody who can make a mistake and then rectify that mistake and reach technically an even higher level, right? Like if you think about a rope that is very strong, if you cut the rope and then tie a knot in the rope, that rope is actually even stronger than, right? Because that knot makes it strong. And so when somebody does something wrong, but then they do proper teshuvah for it, they have an even stronger connection to God. So,
Adina, can I ask you one thing about proper teshuvah? Is an interesting concept because, of course, there's different levels of sin and different levels of transgressions. For example, Judah refusing to acknowledge Tamar and attacking her and not knowing that it was her, apparently. And then
tell me what you mean by refuse to acknowledge and attacking.
Because she came, with a costume on her face covered.
Yeah.
Where he's saying he didn't know it was her. However, he did sleep with her.
Yeah.
Regardless of who that was. So he also committed harlotry.
Yeah.
But by an angel of lust, I understand. He then said that he was sorry. And I'm saying, what are the levels of penitence? In other words, what if she had not taken the cord and the cane? What if she had not had those things? Yeah. She would have been without protection. Yeah. So there was more to it. There was throwing her under the bus, and it wasn't just the harlotry. It was that she had to protect herself. He abandoned her completely and wanted to save himself, which I understand it's human nature to do that. We see that in history all the time. But what are in Judaism, what are the levels of penitence? Not just saying I'm sorry, not just prayer, but what What are the actions?
Yeah. Okay. Great question. So let me just address a few things you said. I'm not sure if when you said he attacked her, I just want to make it very clear that it was consensual.
No, I didn't. I'm sorry. I didn't mean
Okay.
that he physically attacked her. I meant that he denied her afterwards. Like
Afterwards. Okay.
That's what I meant.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Because it was just to address that, like if you see in the verse, just so that you all know, he says to her, I just want to say this, get ready now, I will come to you. Right. So in other words, it was right. Like it was consensual for sure. And a couple things going on here. So first of all, this is before the Torah was given. And so there's a lot of very interesting things where our forefathers and everything kept Torah before it was given. So, but at the same time, many laws did not apply, right? So for example, you were allowed to have more than one wife before the Torah was given, right? So what's interesting here also is, like, in a way, Yehuda, his wife died already. And before the Torah was given, there was no such thing as, there's three steps to marriage, right? Kiddushin, Nisuyin, and I'm missing one. Help me out. Like betrothal and marriage, and then consecrating the marriage. So before the Torah was given, just sleeping with somebody, just being intimate with somebody is what makes you married to them. Okay? So technically, Yehuda, like on a very what's the word? Like on a very technical level, Yehuda did not actually like commit prostitution. That's not the right way of saying it, but he acknowledged, but it was still wrong for someone coming from the house of Yaakov to do something specifically for, like, what appears on a surface level to just be for lust. Like, it was still wrong, and he admitted that, he acknowledged that, and he apologized for that. That's on Yehuda's side. On Tamar's side, she was not a harlot either. Like, even though this, on a literal level, we're calling her a harlot and him committing prostitution, and neither of those are the case for either of them, because Tamar was not, she wasn't married to anybody, and she wasn't like the definition of a prostitute or a harlot at that time was like, I'm hefker, which is like, I'm available to anybody. Like, anybody can come to me. And Tamar wasn't that. She wasn't doing that. She was specifically trying to get Yehuda in a way of trickery, right, for the specific reason of having children through the family of Yehuda, carrying on this line, right? So even though, again, on a surface level, we say she's a harlot and Yehuda's sleeping with a prostitute or whatever, for neither of those are true for either of them, okay? So that is something I also wanted to bring up. Now, another thing that's just very interesting. Okay. Another thing that's just very interesting is, so again, like we said, the Torah wasn't given yet, but after the flood and Noah, right? There was the Noahide laws. In other words, there was humanity taking on certain modes of conduct. What is okay? What is not okay? So one of those laws of conduct that they took on is that harlotry is not okay. Prostitution is not okay. And that humanity took on. And the punishment for that is death. And the punishment, if you were the child of a Kohen, is death by burning, which was Tamar. She was the daughter of a Kohen, Shais. Okay? So her punishment would have been death by burning, except, like I said, she wasn't a harlot. She wasn't, harlotry again is, I am open to anyone. I am available to anyone. She wasn't doing that. So it was all a mistake, that even the fact that people said to her, that people said to Yehuda, your daughter-in-law is a harlot, was wrong. She wasn't. Now, Yehuda said, okay, then the punishment that humanity has decided in this case is death by burning. Like, it's not like he was just coming up with something. That's another thing I want to point out. He wasn't just like, well, here's what I'm going to do to her. It was like, okay, well, we have to like follow the laws of the land, and these are the laws of the land. Okay. Now, Tamar, this is another thing that another aspect of her amazing character is that she decided, I would rather be put to death than embarrass my father-in-law. So she allowed herself to be taken to be put to death. And then she thought, how could I let him know that I am pregnant with his child without embarrassing him, without making this public knowledge? So she had a message sent to him saying, whoever is the owner of these things, that is who is the father of my child, which is just something amazing on her end. And then Yehuda realized completely all of his mistake, so to speak. Again, the angel that lured him, God making this all happen, right? Creating this whole scandalous seeming story in order for Mashiach to come about. But then Yehuda publicly acknowledged his mistake. And he said, no, she's right, I'm wrong. She's not a harlot. She does not deserve to die. And then he married her, even to prove, married her legitimately. And again, that's where, like I said, the Torah was kept before it was given, but then it also wasn't in certain cases. So it was more important for him to, you're not allowed to marry your daughter-in-law. So technically, before the Torah is given, you're allowed to, but our forefathers kept the Torah before it was even given. But here it was more important to stand behind Tamar and to own up to your mistake and to show that she was right than it is to keep the mitzvah before it was given of not marrying your daughter-in-law. So Yehuda actually did marry Tamar. And so he publicly did teshuvah for his mistake, which again was all orchestrated. Does that bring any more clarity to the story?
Not 100%.
I know.
Can you scroll up a little bit more so we can see the rest of it after 23? No, just after verse 23.
After verse 23. But again, just keep in mind that you're reading just the direct
There you go.
translation.
Okay. Oh, so is that the end of it? Wait, so then scroll down to page 4.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. All right. He says, bring her out and let her be burned. And she saved herself with a signet ring. That's just how the story seems to me. She had insurance. She was smart.
Yeah.
She knew it would happen. So I understand that this is all preordained, but I have a more modern or more contemporary, maybe a hardened point of view on it, that she was very smart to keep that because she knew it would happen. Her intentions were very specific. She wanted the child. She wanted the dynasty, which is, I get it. I see it biblically. Mm-hmm. I'm not criticizing that. But she took insurance because she knew what she was doing. If she found out, would be denied. Yeah. So to me, I think there's realism there. I think it's okay. I mean, I think it's human. I think it's a human story. And I think that there's kind of more, there's something to be said. I'm not denying what you say, nor what the sages say. I'm just saying from a human point of view, it's okay to have been careful and a little bit conniving. I think that's what she was. I'm not, do you know what I'm saying?
100% it's okay.
She was self-protective.
Yeah.
She was not a saint, and she, that's what I see there.
Yeah, no, she was very smart how she went about this.
She was super smart. She protected herself. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was again, if you go just a little bit deeper, it was the like how we spoke about why does Mashiach have to come about from this secretive, different kind of story and right, on a spiritual level, what was going on here?
That evil used evil. I thought that's a very interesting. Evil used an evil approach to get the good. Very interesting concept.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking of the idea that maybe because oftentimes men are the ones who are writing commentary, and it'd be interesting to find out in the female, the woman's commentary that has been published. But it's interesting how when Judah has sex with a woman who's just sitting by the road, he's excused because it's like he has the same thing that Balaam and the donkey it's forced on him. I mean, it's like, I don't know, I get a kind of I'm not a skeptical view on that, but it's kind of like excusing him. And I'm saying, well, he did have choices. I mean, God would set this in motion so that the messianic line would happen, but it depended on Judah having lust for this woman who he didn't even know her face because she wore a veil. And I'm thinking it's an explanation that would make men happy. You know, that he didn't know her, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, there used to be like, the devil made me do it. You know, that was an excuse for doing something wrong. It was out of my control. And so, you know, I'm saying, okay, I understand the story and I'll accept that it's a story. But I kind of have this twinge of like, okay, he did, you know, men do make choices.
Yeah. So here's what's very interesting is this is why I knew that we were going to go into the story and we were going to end up with more questions than answers. All of us are looking at the story and reading the translation of the Torah with modern day views and eyes. And let me see if I could find all the right words to say this. Modern day views and eyes are a beautiful, wonderful thing, but it is not Torah, because Torah is 100% holy. And again, when there's a story in Torah, God is not saying like, let me just tell you this very interesting story about Yehuda and Tamar and how Yehuda had lust and he found Tamar and he didn't even know her and he just had sex with her. Like, that is not at all the view that we could approach anything in Torah. Torah is God's wisdom and will. And a lot of it is very directly that, right? Like God saying, you know, specific commandments, specific instructions for life, but then there's story in there, right? So then we can get confused and think, well, story, that's just like the history, right? Like, in other words, we just have some human history leading up to the giving of the Torah, and then after the giving of the Torah, we have a lot more of laws and mitzvot. That is not the case. What's written, like, for history, we can go, I don't know actually how accurate all of it's going to be, but for history, we go to history books, right? In Torah, anything that's in Torah has every single letter has so much meaning and so much value in it. Every single story, we don't know all the details of any story, right? We know so little. If I was going to try to describe Tamar to you, I have a little bit to go off of, right? I don't have a ton. Anything we're told in Torah is because it directly is a message for us in our lives nowadays. So we can't look at the story of Yehuda and Tamar with modern day eyes and say, this is an example of a guy getting away with things. This is an example of, oh, men just have lust. And then we just have men commentaries that are excusing it, right? And that is where all of our brains want to go. And again, that is how we're, you know, like, even just the fact that if women in those days wore veils, let's say, right away, a modern day brain could be like, yeah, cover up the face of a woman. That's terrible. Versus like, that was what was like considered, that was the modest way then for the women then. And it was a beautiful thing. And it doesn't mean that women were even like upset about it, right? Like, here's something where a lot of times, I say this a lot, but I'm going to just say it again, that, you know, in the world, there are in society, there are situations and times where women have been demoted, right? And become second-class citizens, you know, like the whole equal pay thing or whatever, all these different issues. It does exist that that we need women's rights movements and all of that to further opportunities for women. The problem is the problem happened when people actually were like, okay, look, this thing in society, oh, and it exists in Judaism. When I want to argue the case that it never existed in Judaism, ever, right? Why are, you know, in Judaism, in Torah, it says, in Jewish law, it says that that girls mature faster than boys, and so girls become a Jewish woman at the age of 12, and boys become a Jewish man at the age of 13. Now, what's happening in society, I think, is that and that's actually a compliment in a way to the Jewish woman, and yet girls are having their bat mitzvah at 13 because boys are having it at 13, so we got to all be equal. Right? But the reason girls have it at 12 was never a negative. So that's just one example of many, 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 where I think that the the push in secular society for women's equality and women's rights got transferred into Judaism, and then things got a little bit skewed. Okay, so that's just like the way I would say, again, like I knew again that this story was going to bring up more questions than answers in a way, and I'm like, this is Torah, we're not going to skip it. I'm not going to skip it because I might not have all the language to really, truly, deeply explain this to you in a way that all of our brains are going to be super calm after this story. I'm like, this is Torah, and we're going to dive straight into it. I'm going to read up as much as I can of it. Trust me, you can ask Menachem about the conversations we had about it, where I'm like, what? How could it say this? And who this? And, you know, anyways, I'm not done. I have more questions than answers, but I do know this is not the classical case of the stuff that we want to say with modern eyes, that like, he's just being excused and he's just lustful. And then the other thing I just want to say, and then Harriet, I'll just go back to you for,
Okay.
is that there's certain rules by which we can deduce things from Torah. It's not like anyone can just look into Torah and say, well, this is the explanation, right? So even the commentaries, it's part of the oral Torah, and they are divinely inspired, okay? So one of the rules we can deduce by Torah is that when a Hebrew word is used in one place, and that same Hebrew word is used in another place, there's a connection between the two places. So in this, that's like one of the rules. It's a rule that we can derive certain things from. So in this story, it says he turned towards her. The word that it uses for that is vayet, which is a very strange way of saying that he turned towards her. When it could say vayelach, like he went to her. And so where else do we see that same exact word? Was in the story with Bilam and the donkey. And that exact same word, so there the donkey turned. What was that turning? It was against his will turning. It was like he was forced. So that's how we know that here Yehuda was essentially like forced. Now, forced, driven, like there was like this extra godliness playing in here that had to be played, because no, technically Yehuda was not a man who was going to just go and like have some desires and then find a prostitute. Not that she was a prostitute, and not that he wasn't that type of person, but yet here this story he did. I'm not denying that he did. So how did that have to happen? There had to be some sort of like, you know, extra transcendent, that's not the right word, I'm having a hard time with words today, drive to push him in this direction, again, in order to like orchestrate this event. So again, I don't think we're excusing him. He owned up to it. He said he did a mistake. He is considered a Baal Teshuvah, that he did true repentance for it. It wasn't a problem. And like, we also have to look at the story. Like, Tamar wanted this. So it's not like she was trying to make this happen. And here we're like, how could a man do this? He didn't, like, she wanted him to. She just knew that it had to come about in like a trickery way, right? And it was actually selfless of her to do this, because that's not her nature either. So here we're like, Yehuda's doing something that's not his nature. Tamar's doing something that's totally not her nature. Very odd story, all to bring about, again, the coming of Mashiach. Fascinating. Okay.
The question I have, I got off, my brain went someplace else. So when everything was over, so Yehuda ended up marrying Tamar?
Yes.
Okay. And then helped raise the two children
Yes.
that were his kids.
Exactly.
And so we have people who are named their kids today Peretz.
Yes.
But do we know anything about the third son, Shelah? Sheila?
I don't know anything. I mean, I know that there's a reference to Mashiach as Shelah.
Okay.
So, and that was like this other interesting connection. I don't know anything. I can look into it if there's something more that we know about him.
Well, I think Tamar did what she needed to do. And I think that we don't know of the backstory, because she's the widow of two of his sons. I assume that he was taking care of her in some way. You take care of your family, providing for them, but he wasn't in close contact with her.
Right. It says that she was in her father's household. Like she was
He
kind
would
of
have
like went back to her
recognized
family
her
of origin.
Yeah. So, but he probably, I would get the feeling that because she was the widow of his kid, that she was not just dependent on her own family. She was getting maybe a little bit something from him to take care of him. But I think the fact that this is the first time somebody apologizes for what they do and that's forgiveness, and returning to thing is really important. And I think that follows through a lot of our history. Returning is really important.
Yeah.
And that's important.
I agree, Harriet. And I also just wanted to make a point, Adina, that of course, when we talk from the contemporary point of view, that's who we are. And the Torah speaks to us through our contemporary mind, because we're not sages. And when we question it, I love your teachings and I love your point of view, but I want to reassure you that when I question it, and maybe in Harriet's defense too, we're not questioning the Torah. We're being Jews.
100%. I love your questions.
Yeah, no,
I never want you to stop questioning it.
No, we're discussing. And one thing actually that Harriet just said was the concept of forgiveness and teshuvah. I'm not sure that I don't understand it as forgiveness. I understand it as our atonement, something we are not. Forgiveness is not part of it. It's something we owe ourselves and the person whom we harmed, or the situation that we've harmed, to fix it, to atone. Forgiveness is on the other side. That's a different sort of concept, just as a thought. What are your thoughts on that?
Mine? Tell me what you're asking. What you're asking.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I see what you're saying. Like teshuvah is on my end. I need to right my own wrongs, and then forgiveness is on the other person's end, that to forgive, right? So my thoughts on that are, when we do a proper teshuvah, God promises us he'll forgive us. It's like an automatic, like, I will forgive you when you do teshuvah, right? So here, Yehuda definitely did teshuvah, and I think he was clearly granted forgiveness the same way. I mean, again, Mashiach comes from his line, and he was chosen as the actual like leader of the Jewish people from there on out. And that's again in the coming Torah portions, right, where he has this kind of standoff with Yosef, and Yosef is like, I want to make sure you really changed your ways. I want to make sure you really are a different person now. And he did prove to be that way.
So right? The deeper story is not just teshuvah. The deeper story is that we can be ruined. We can be ruinous within ourselves. And somehow, again, the question goes back to, what is penitence? What is that comprised of? And how do you earn that forgiveness? What is the point at which you are forgiven, either by others or by God? But it's a giant Jewish concept that I love. It's so deep.
It is.
Because it means we can be human and yet somehow correct ourselves. I think Barbara was going to say something.
I just wanted to say that self-forgiveness is a very big part of teshuvah. To be able to forgive yourself is often more difficult than the wronged person has in forgiving you.
I love that. Yes.
Me too. That's beautiful.
Thank you for sharing that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. 100%. And I know, and so I know that, like, again, with our modern brains, and trust me, I'm right there with you guys. So I love your questions, and keep them coming. Don't ever not question. But with our modern brains, right, we would just want to like jump to like the details of the story and really wrapping our brain around that. But I don't want to forget, again, that whole deeper Hasidic look on the idea of it being like this back and forth between God and the Jewish people, because I just think that that's also just so fascinating, right? That that whole explanation where it's like the Rosh Hashanah and the Yom Kippur and us being on that high, and then sort of we forget about it, we go back into our daily life, we're just, you know, we might just get caught up in, I don't know, Corona, like the newest lockdown or whatever it is, right? And then like Hanukkah is really that time to like rededicate, recommit ourselves to light our menorah and say, no, God, we're yours, right? We're not going anywhere. And like, God, we're like, hi, we're here. And God's like, yes, they're mine all along. Like, I'm not, you know, like just that I just love that really deeper, and how we see that in the story of Yehuda and Tamar and what's going on, and how we, you know, how we show our proof. We're like, we're lighting a menorah. Do you see? I have your wick, I have your oil, I have your, right? I have the menorah, I have it. So you can't just, you know, listen to those angels that are like saying, are they really doing what they're supposed to be doing? Are you sure you want to stay committed to them? You know, like just like that whole dynamic I don't want to forget about, because that, I think, out of the whole story is the most, I mean, yes, we learn, you know, some really beautiful things about Tamar and just some interesting things about good and evil, but like that part of the story I think is the most relevant to what can I do today because I just learned that story, that idea.
I think is one point important, Adina.
Mm-hmm.
It's the, how do we know the forgiveness? How do we know we did a proper tshuva? The question came often. I mean, the tshuva is like when we acknowledge the mistake, when we were on your way, we never do this mistake again. Any kind of mistake we did, to do tshuva, that means it's not like some people think like a Yom Kippur, like especially the no-Jew think like, okay, you have Yom Kippur is like you do contrition and then you start over again, you know? No, when you do tshuva on Yom Kippur or on your personal tshuva or asking forgiveness from your friend or whatever, that means whatever you did will never happen again. Then you know that your tshuva is accepted. Your tshuva is, with Yehuda, is level where become stronger, higher, because he worked on himself. If he acknowledged to, if he didn't acknowledge, like she won't have stayed on him. And then he could have go his own way, but he was stronger than that. He did it to tshuva, and that make him higher level. The same as Reuven. Apparently Reuven did tshuva for many, many years. He mourned for what he did to his lacking of respect to his father and things like that. So I think the question would come often is, how do we do a tshuva? The tshuva is like when you make sure you never do this kind of mistake again.
Yeah.
Wow,
I mean,
that's so helpful, Miriam. And Miriam, I love to see you. I'm so happy to see you.
I know I try to be with you, but sometimes when it's later, like it's too late for me at night.
Oh, we miss you.
I miss all of you. This is why for me, it's like getting back to my Novatos community. I love to be together. I loved it.
We love it too.
I love it too, and I love to learn my Kala giving classes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, thank you so much for adding that, Ima. And it's really like a big, you know, a big topic, like you said, Jolie, to talk about teshuvah and forgiveness. But if you want to just like narrow it down, it's 3 steps. Proper teshuvah is 3 steps. Hoda'ah, which is acknowledging what you did. Charata, regretting what you did. And then Kabbalah al-Ha'asid, taking, like ensuring that you're not going to do it again, like taking on, I'm not going to do this again, right? You can't just like regret it. It's like the oops, I'm sorry. And then you just go back and do it right away. So it's acknowledging or admitting and then regretting and then not planning, not, you know, being very sincere that I'm not doing this again. That would be like the 3 steps of sincere teshuvah in short. Okay.
I want to say something.
Yes.
Rita taught preschool kids also, but one of the things that I used to do is when a kid did something that wasn't supposed to be done and they'd say, I'm sorry. We'd say like, you're sorry for what you did. Tell us what you did and you change. And then in education classes, we said education is a change of behavior. So, you know, if you do something that's wrong and you change your behavior, then you're educated. Yeah. You've learned something. If you don't change your behavior, it's just words. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Exactly. You know, so it has to be changed. So, you know, for him to acknowledge what he did and acknowledge Tamar meant, and then acknowledge her, that was good. And I like that idea. I like the idea of teshuvah more than forgiveness, because forgiveness, sometimes I don't, there's certain things, like I guess the Holocaust writer said, we can't, you know, the people who did bad things to other Jews, we can't give them forgiveness because the bad thing that was done to that person has the person can only ask for forgiveness from that person. Anyway, so I think teshuvah, returning or getting to the right path, is the most important thing.
Yeah.
I think it is too, but I think also there's a 4th aspect to forgiveness. And maybe it's incorporated in the 3. I don't mean to, I'm not questioning the 3, but I'm wondering, where is the action, the amends? Where is the fixing of the harm? not just, I feel bad, I'm never going to do it again. Oh, I crashed my car into your home. I feel bad, I'm never going to do it again. Doesn't really doesn't create forgiveness. Maybe that's personal teshuva, but it doesn't create a forgiven person.
There's also teshuva, there's between you and God, and then there's between you and another person, right? So
Yeah.
between you and God might not need that fourth step
Okay.
because
We're talking about, okay.
right. Versus like Yehuda in this story, first of all, he married Tamar. He was like, I'm not gonna just, right? Like I'm staying with her, like she's my wife now, and you know, whatever. Like that was definitely one step in showing like I'm not just gonna like toss her off, or you know, like I'm gonna stand behind my words and stand behind her. That like she was right here, I was wrong, and all of that. But yeah, I mean, again, there's always so much to dig into these things. So we're going to do again, we're going to have Torah Tea again next week. But tomorrow night is the first night of Hanukkah. So whether you join us here together on Zoom for a Hanukkah party or whether you just do your own thing, make sure to light your first candle, your own menorah. And yeah, we'll do this again next week, and then we'll take a 2-week break and hopefully continue again in January. Thank you all for joining.
And we'll be there tomorrow.
Yay. I'm so glad.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you and happy Hanukkah.
Happy
Bye,
Hanukkah.
Yasha Koach, Yasha Koach.
Bye, everybody.